you almost have to wonder, knowing the United States being what they are, I'm surprised that they weren't fighting on the side of the Nazis against the Red Army. It almost seems like that would have been the natural inclination if,
Yeah.
well, perhaps a lot of it did have to do with FDR and how he really felt and versus maybe how the State Department felt. I mean, we know that after the war, so many Nazi collaborators or outright Nazis themselves were brought over to the States to work in various capacities via intelligence, especially during the Cold War. So it really doesn't surprise me at all that so much of what we learn about our country is very dark and disturbing, but it was kept in the shadows for a very long time. But it does appear that there is somewhat of a great awakening that's happening right now in this country. Your thoughts on that?
I certainly have that strong impression from listening to so many fine commentators in the alternative media in the United States. Somebody that I've been watching a lot lately, more because I'm fascinated with what she's saying and how it's being perceived by her audience, is Candace Owens. I have a lot of disagreement with Candace Owens on a number of issues, but to listen to somebody who has such a high profile amongst Republicans and those who supported Donald Trump routinely on a daily basis eviscerate Israel and openly criticize Zionism in the harshest of terms and with complete justification, because we are witnessing and have been witnessing for over 2 years a genocide by this apartheid entity. This is just mind-blowing to me. And of course, she's not alone. You have people, again, somebody with whom I disagree on a number of issues, Tucker Carlson, courageously coming out and saying he was wrong about a U.S. foreign policy. He was wrong about Israel, America serving, going to war and expending tens of billions of dollars on advancing Israel's regional objectives is contrary to the interests of the American people. I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. It's extraordinary. And I just mentioned two of the most prominent examples of this on the right. So the one thing we haven't seen yet in the United States, and by the way, I lived in the United States for 7 years, so in New York City, so I got to know, at least in that part of the country, the political discourse fairly well. And the one thing we yet haven't seen in the United States is this translate into a rebellion at the ballot box, where people are voting for neither the Republicans nor the Democrats. The great majority of Americans are still voting either Republican or Democrat if they vote. And of course, a very significant percentage are fed up with politics so much that they don't even vote anymore. But unless and until we see this discontent with the political elite, both Democrat and Republican, translate into a shift in voting patterns, I don't think we're going to see any real change in the foreign policy of the government. Whatever, anger there may be amongst the general population in America. And this is true of throughout the major Western countries. In Canada, the vast majority of the people continue to vote for the two parties, the Liberals and Conservatives, who have dominated government for the entire post-World War II period. As in the United States, there's never been a party since the Second World War that was in power federally in Canada that was not liberal or conservative, both of whom, as I say, have the right-wing neoconservative foreign policy. So we desperately need to see people finally cast their ballots for some party other than the two parties of war that rule all of Western society, not just the United States.
Yeah, this is a global situation. I feel like we're having a global revolution, and it's happening. It's happening. I mean, people think that war is revolution. The war comes at the end of the revolution. That's how it ends. But we're in this revolution, and I do feel it bubbling up in a lot of places, and empires scrambling, like playing whack-a-mole, trying to get everything in order and trying to keep everything under control. But it's really not working. I wanted to ask you something, going back to your time living in New York and about that, because I know you started out working for the man, and that you realized that that's not good. I want to know what that was like for you, because I think you're a little bit older than me, like not too much older than me, but at that time, what was going on in, on Wall Street, where you were, where you're like, this is not for me?
Well, I worked for a firm called Sullivan and Cromwell, which when I was coming out of law school, was understood to be one of the 3 or 4 best corporate law firms in the United States. I graduated from the University of Toronto Faculty of Law. I spent my whole life in Canada up until that point in time, but I wanted to, first of all, I was burdened by debt after coming out of law school. And the fastest way for me to be able to pay that debt off was to get a job on Wall Street, because the pay there was much better than anything I could get in Canada. Even the highest paying job in the Canadian legal profession for an incoming lawyer was nowhere near as lucrative as a Wall Street position. And also, to be honest with you, my politics leaned to the right at that time. So I was politically oriented towards doing that kind of work, work on Wall Street for the elite. And very quickly when I came in, first of all, one thing I noticed immediately was that I stood out as being somebody from an immigrant background who did not go to private school and who had not attended an Ivy League school in the United States. Simply because my family couldn't afford such a thing. And I was surrounded by people who were overwhelmingly white and privileged. A lot of the men had a Roman numeral after their name. I'd never met any of those before. They were, all of them, with a couple of exceptions who later, I think, sold out, were oriented politically to the right. And they were people, I must say, the people I was surrounded by were people of enormous skill and dedication to the job at hand. They were amongst the best you're going to find in the legal profession. And they were completely and utterly committed in their day-to-day lives as lawyers to advancing the interests of the elites. So, for example, one of the big cases they were working on at Sullivan and Cromwell at the time was defending Microsoft from an antitrust prosecution by the U.S. government. Back in those days, from time to time, the U.S. government did prosecute the large corporations for antitrust violations, and they would just the amount of money that they were prepared to spend, these corporate clients, in order to defend themselves from well-grounded charges of violating U.S. federal law was unbelievable. Huge gobs of money, armies of lawyers. The money was no object to them. The legal bills that I saw were gigantic, and the high net worth individuals that we defended as well. And our job with respect to securities regulation and banking regulation, it was very clear when I came in, was to help. Our clients were careful to stay within the four corners of the law, but they were constantly pushing the boundaries outward of what they could get away with, looking for loopholes, looking for weaknesses and ambiguities, using their power and their wealth in order to lobby governments and regulators to weaken regulation that was, oriented to protect the public interest. I saw this every single day, and it became quite apparent to me within a couple of years that I was basically working in the service of the wealthiest and most powerful and influential Americans. That was my job, to protect their interests to the detriment of the general public. And so, as I've said many times, after 4 or 5 years of doing that, what was a soul-crushing experience. I was so disenchanted that I told the partners that I work with that I'd had enough, and they tried to encourage me to remain because I was a pretty hardworking guy, and I was a dutiful servant of the partnership, but I just couldn't do it anymore, and I was so disenchanted by it that I actually left the legal profession altogether. As you mentioned, I then went off and did something that was really unusual. And by the way I got into becoming a high-stakes professional blackjack player was that other disgruntled Wall Street lawyers whom I had met at the time, they formed the team and then recruited me to join their team. Everybody that I worked with on that team, there was a core of about 8 of us at the beginning. It grew to be, over 100 people. But the 8 core players were all disgruntled former Wall Street professionals. And
there was a movie based on this, right? Like wasn't there a movie like 21?
Yeah, a Zionist specialist known as Kevin Spacey did a movie.
A Zionist pedo.
Yeah, wasn't what was her name? Name's slipping me right now. The cute
That's
blonde
awesome
girl.
that you did that, though. I always thought that was more, and I'm not saying that you're not exceptionally bright, because you are definitely exceptionally bright, but I always thought that was more like a real savant kind of thing, like being able to count cards. Like the fact that there's that many people that can be doing it is it's crazy to me that you would even have teams, you know?
Yeah, it actually isn't that hard. So people, you don't memorize the actual cards that are coming out of the shoe at the time. What's happened is that some very smart mathematicians, years before I became a professional blackjack player, developed a system to simplify the task, and they assigned an arithmetic value to each card. So the simplest, I don't want to waste too much of your time on this, but the simplest system is called the high-low, and every card in the deck is assigned a value of either -1, 0, or +1. So you just, after a while, you practice, and when the card comes out of the shoe, you don't see, jack, you don't see king, you don't see ace. What you see is a number. The number is +1, -1, or 0. And in your head, you just keep a running count as they're coming out. You're subtracting, adding, and it really becomes like a mindless task. You just have to practice a lot. The hard part about it, frankly, was doing it in a casino without letting on that you were counting cards, which is perfect.
It has a limited lifespan. Let's be real.
Exactly.
That's a very, it's sort of like you can only get away with it for so long.
Absolutely. And the casinos at that time were becoming increasingly sophisticated at surveillance. And it's a little known fact that facial recognition technology came out of the casino industry. I actually had to bring a lawsuit under U.S. privacy legislation against back in the 90s against a company called Biometrica, which was based in Boston. They were one of the pioneers of facial recognition technology. And I never imagined back then that this would become, ubiquitous. It's everywhere, facial recognition technology. It's far more sophisticated now than it was then.
Well, as somebody who used to go to Atlantic City, I lived in Monmouth County, New Jersey for most of my life growing up. And I only liked playing poker, but I also understand the degenerate side of gambling. I've seen it. It's affected my family and friends. So yeah, I can also understand the moral compass and the fight that you were dealing with when you were working at a high-powered law firm, probably somewhere on Fifth Avenue or somewhere within that vicinity. I just have to know before we continue, have you ever been to the Halal Gyro stand at 53rd and 6th, directly across from the Hilton Hotel? Have you ever been to that one?
I may well have been. I'm not sure why you're asking, but it's entirely possible.
For somebody who's Greek, I will say
It's
this.
fun.
I'm not Greek, but that's
his favorite place. That's why he's asking you. Peter loves it.
That's like on a Saturday night after the Knicks game or something like that. That's a 2-hour line and no one cares because it's that type of street food that was off the charts. So.
In New York City, it will always be in my heart. I have a deep affection for that place, even though it's changed quite a bit since the 90s, unfortunately, not for the better.
I want to circle back to, and I wanted to circle back to a little earlier what you said about Candace Owens. And I think in her case, it's just a question that her friend, and I do believe Charlie was her friend, that they killed him. And she's made it her mission to basically say, look, I'm wealthy. I have a huge platform. I'm going to use it. And I know who can, and the funny thing is that people are surmising like what her motivation is. And, is she really trying to find the killer or killers for that matter? She knows exactly who killed him. She is just trying to create a platform that convinces millions of other people exactly who the killers are as well.